Welcome. My name is Martello, and I will talk about Bugbear Awakening, an adventure for 1 to 4 characters from 1st to 6th level over the course of the next, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 minutes. So, Bugbear Awakening is an adventure for Dungeons and Dragons, the 5th edition, and it is especially written for small parties. And this is so my motivation for this adventure was that in my experience I often played with small groups of players. So maybe we only had, like I had 2 or 3 friends, and we wanted to start a campaign, and often it's quite difficult to find adventures or campaigns that accommodate for that. Most adventures are written for larger parties, and there are special challenges with small parties in regards to the balancing and how it all works, especially during the first levels. So that was my main motivation for writing this adventure. And that was about 1 year ago that I started it. And while I was writing it, I was playing it with several groups. This initial group was the main playtesting, let's put it that way. And there were some other things happening at that time. So I was reading a book from Richard Baker. It's a trilogy called The Last Mythal. It's one of those books about the Forgotten Realms. Very good book. And this was, I was taking this book as a background. So The Last Mythal describes some things happening about a century ago that have to do with high elf wars. And this is kind of the historical backdrop of some of the things which are happening here. Another thing that motivated me was that I was reading the book, the D&D book, Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. So kind of the second monster handbook. And in this book, there are quite a few new player races. And some of these player races are actually not that new. They are well-known monster races from before. Goblins, orcs, and so on. And bugbears. Now, in the Forgotten Realms, these races are monsters. There are no examples of any bugbear heroes. So I thought, in order to change that and start a journey towards enabling these former monster races to be played in the Forgotten Realms, I pick one of those races and give them a different twist. So that's how it all started. And what I ended up with is this adventure, which has 8 chapters. And the chapters are not equally long. That has its reasons. So there are basically 3 main phases. Let's put it that way in this adventure. So first, in the first 4 chapters, it's a relatively linear plot. The characters have not too many choices. They are hired by a wizard, have to do some things, and then things are developing more. They start to travel, and then starting with chapter 5, there are more options. There are some side quests. One of the side quests in particular is almost more challenging, more important at that point than the main quest. And the adventurers need to decide. They need to prioritize what's most important. How do they achieve success with these different kinds of things? And then at the very end, in the last chapter, chapter 8, which is the longest chapter, there are even more options. They come into a region, the Eastern High Forest, and it's almost a little sandbox setting, so they can travel around freely and try to solve the puzzle. That's the chapter. That's the general setup. I will now walk you through the introduction and 3 chapters and explain a little bit how things are happening here. So the introduction gives an idea what it's all about, what I'm just telling you in more detail. You see, I have character illustration, and there are also some landscape illustrations. All of these are created by a human artist I worked with by the name of Anje. And there are also quite a few maps within the adventure. You will see that later. I created those maps myself using Incarnate. Here are the factions described, which play a role in the adventure. and I explain how to run the adventure. Here's the first map, the east coast of the Forgotten Realms, very well known. And then the adventure starts. In the beginning, it's a quite simple quest. They get a task given to them by a wizard, their garden. Here again, heaps of maps. And they have their first travel, they have their first encounters. Most of these encounters are not of fighting nature, or at least fighting can be avoided. So there are some challenges, for example, a race in the swamp, and then they will get back, and the plot goes on. There are different tasks, different things to do. And in the end, let me go to page 44, because that is where chapter 5 starts. This is the time when things are getting more complicated. So they got an important side task, which has to do with the defense of Secomber, but the adventurers also still should feel compelled to fulfill their main task, which has to do with saving the bugbears. So they need to figure out how they do all of these things. There's another piece of traveling to be done, this time with dwarves who happen to transport a basilisk. There are some complications, of course, and then they get to Baldur's Gate and can travel on. More things to be done, and now I'll jump to the last chapter, which is to be found on page 62. Mythal. So Mythal is a ruined elven fortress, and here is the setting that I mentioned in the beginning. The book by Richard Baker is coming into the whole thing. So in the last Mythal is one of the places where things are happening, and at this time, the adventure visited again. It has new inhabitants, and they need to find out what to do about all that. And in the end, their task is to find a new home for the bugbears. But in order to achieve that, the only way to achieve that is to collaborate with the high elves. So the big task for last chapter is not. I mean, there's also a villain to defeat, but the big task is to bring the wood elves of the high forest on their side. So with the things that they're doing, they can collect favor. So each of the actions they're doing results in a certain amount of favor, and if they collect enough favor, they can start convincing the elves to let the bugbears get into Mythal. Yes, I think that gives enough details. Let's go to the NPC section. So I wanted to have this adventure driven by its different NPCs, different characters, both the villainous ones as well as the good and helping ones. So for each of these NPCs, and there are 12 of them, there is one full page. Of course, there are the statistics, but there are also quite a few hints how to play them, down to how they behave in combat. So Boss is a friend of the adventurers, hopefully over the course of the adventures, and Del Garden is kind of their patron. And there are more of those. And this brings this to an end. Finally, what I want to mention is that all of the maps, and there are 25 of them, all of the maps are provided separately as JPEGs, PNGs, in image format. And so it's easy to print them out or use them in your virtual desktop system if you're playing online. So here are 3 examples for that. Yeah, and I think that's the end. I really enjoyed writing this adventure, and I hope others will enjoy as much as I do writing it and playtesting it. That's maybe something that I should still mention. So I playtested it now 3 times and optimized it more and more. So I played it with different groups, and as it is with playtesting, every time you find something that you could do better, or you find something surprising that your adventurers do. So this was multiple times optimized, and yeah, I hope it's an enjoyable adventure, an enjoyable campaign. And with this, I want to say thank you very much for listening and watching.